Let's go ahead and talk to Tony in Illinois. Tony, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you, Alex?
Good, sir.
You know, I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate hearing you. You're very, very loud. You're what we used to call back in the 70s an alarmist, but we need alarmists these days.
Well, hold on. $7.4 trillion in 6 weeks stolen by offshore foreign banks. Open announcements that they're going to use the U.S. Army against the American people. Bank runs all over the world, cancer viruses in the vaccine, fluoride in the water. I mean, what is there to... I mean, it is alarming, sir.
Definitely, it's alarming, and it's very troubling. I'm, of course, calling here from Chicago, and basically, what's going on with the Chicago machine is somewhat like a microcosm of what you're speaking about. What's going on nationally.
Well, actually, the Chicago machine was always a big part of Clinton's makeup in his cabinet and his White House. In his West Wing. Now it looks like the Chicago machine's going to make up the whole thing.
Basically, they're basically in control. In fact, I try to run for public office. I do have to say, though, that when my uncle was housing secretary, I am Tony Cisneros. I'm Henry Cisneros' nephew here in Chicago. We have a large family. We go everywhere in the Hispanic world. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that when he was housing secretary, the Mayor Daley tried to put his hands in the pension funds, and he federalized HUD, CHA with HUD, Chicago Housing with federal housing, so that he could leave the pension funds back to the pensioners, those that deserved it. And, of course, Daley has been in a disagreement with. That's why I've never gotten anywhere politically here in Chicago. And I've tried to run for public office. I've ran for Congress twice. But nevertheless, that's not why I called you. I called you to encourage you to keep on alarming the world. One question, though, I have to ask you is that when we do get rid of the Fed, and we will eventually get rid of it, because I believe that when the people are angry enough to speak, that they will overthrow the oppressive government, as Thomas Jefferson said, and a lot of our framers of the Constitution, our forefathers said that when people band together, there's nothing in the world that can stop them, nothing. And but my question is, when we do get rid of the Fed, we do go back to the gold standard, the silver standard, and sound monetary, which has been historically the standard of currency was gold and silver, and of course precious stones and so on and so forth. But my question is, when that happens, who basically, I believe whoever owns most of the gold is basically going to be in control. And I would like to ask you, who do you think that would be? Or, I mean, do we still have enough gold in our reserves, Fort Knox, and in our reserves, in our independent banks? I'm not talking about Federal Reserve.
No, it's a great question. The best thing to do is to Google or go to YouTube and Google Alex Jones, the Money Masters, and I had the makers, one of them's a banker, on. They made the film The Money Masters, and they break down that they disagree with Ron Paul, and I see their points. I mean, and we should have a public debate about this, that we shouldn't go to a totally gold-backed currency because the bankers, the private banking families, predominantly based in Europe, they have cornered the major supplies, the big stockpiles of gold. Going back to 1933, when they ordered our great-grandparents and grandparents to hand their gold in for paper notes back, they printed up paper money, the government did, gave it to us, and then we had to give them our gold. That was then shipped to Europe because it was illegal for Americans to own gold, and they doubled the price of gold in just 1 year. That was a huge profit for the International Crime Syndicate. Yes, a lot of monetary experts believe we can have a fiat currency controlled by the government, but educate the public about the money supply, use a money supply like Lincoln did to actually empower the people, because all money really should be is a symbol of agreed-upon exchange so that we can grease the skids and accelerate the ease of commerce. And so, whereas Ron Paul is an economist in his own right with the Austrian school, with the von Mises Institute, and I see his points and understand his arguments, he himself has said we would have to phase that in. And I tend to lean towards the model and the economic reform model put out by Richard C. Cook, who's a monetary historian, an economist, and that model is similar to the model put out by the makers of the Money Masters, which, by the way, we have for sale on Infowars.com on DVD. It's 3.5 hours long, but folks can also watch it for free floating around on the web. But that's an important 3.5 hours to watch. And at the end, they have the monetary plan. And people can say, well, that's boring, monetary plans. Well, your whole life depends on it. Our whole future depends on it for the listeners. I mean, we better get control of this or it's over. But going back, you're saying Mr. Cisneros was is your father?
No, he's my third uncle.
Okay, he's your uncle. He's your uncle.
My grandfather was a Mexican revolutionary, but he was under Venustiano Carranza. He's basically the author of the Mexican revolutionary constitution that's in effect that Vicente Fox was basically subjecting himself under. He was at least the last one, but but anyway, he was a revolutionary, which you would call a land-owning conservative revolutionary, because when my grandparents came over, they did have gold pieces that were confiscated when Roosevelt passed the Gold Confiscation Act.
Oh, absolutely. That happened, and people didn't know. Why do you think they targeted Cisneros? I'm not saying he's perfect, but it's kind of like the New York governor went after the bankers, and so they shut him down. And I had heard they went after Cisneros because he didn't go along with Daley. Is that what you heard inside the family?
Basically, yes. That's what he did not want to play ball with the machine, and he appealed to Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton said, "Well, look, I appointed you housing secretary, not Daley." So that's when my uncle basically came in and federalized Chicago housing with HUD to protect the pension funds of the pensioners.
I know, and they're now in the media today blaming Cisneros, and I'm not defending Cisneros because you're his nephew. I mean, I'm not saying he's perfect. The point is blaming him for what the central banks did, selling derivatives off of the loans, has nothing to do with HUD and with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That's another red herring.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. My desire is to run again here in Chicago within the next major election for citywide office. I'm looking to run for city treasurer to get at least the city back on sound footing, financial footing. Of course, Miriam Santos, the last Hispanic treasurer, Daley had set her up where they eliminated her, all because she had gotten more votes than him. That was basically the root of it. Daley hates competition. He hates anybody that's going to get more votes, because that would be thrown to him.
Nobody's going to argue with you. I mean, his dad was the mob boss of Chicago.
Thank you. And although yes, you're right. Very, very controlled with the mafia. Very controlled with the and of course behind the mafia. I think you already should know who's behind the mafia. I mean, what with the Sicilian mafia. I mean, come on, and this gets into the religious aspect of the religion.
No, it gets into the P2 Lodge in the Vatican.
Thank you. Amen. You just said it. Basically, that's it. All Sicilians, Italians, they're not Lutherans or Presbyterians or even Baptists. So that should give you. And that's why my concern is that if we do get back on the gold standard, come on, the Satanic Vatican has controlled gold for the last 18 centuries. They've been collecting it. Come on, 18 centuries collecting gold. You know they're going to have some power, some say in what's going on when we do get back on the gold standard. That's why my concern is that the people have the gold, the people have the silver, the people have real estate, the people have basically hard assets. You know what I'm saying? Oh, I'm listening to you, and I agree with you. And call back sometime, Tony. It's good to have you on board the show.